Good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is the morning meeting. You can see Sean is off today. In fact, Sean will be off all week. So stay tuned for a series of exciting guest hosts, including today. Some would argue the most exciting possibility of all. Jay Hogan Gidley is here, along with Dan Hogan. Welcome in. Tell folks who don't know you maybe three things about you.
Um, I am from the South, which you can probably tell by my accent. I've been in politics from everyone I've worked with, from Mike Huckabee to Elizabeth Dole to Donald Trump to Mike Johnson. And I also can do calligraphy.
Ooh.
Those were the three I was looking for. Hogan is currently advisor to the Speaker of the House and talks to his friends in the Trump administration on a regular basis. And so he'll be providing some great insight to us from, as we like to say in Washington, both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. I'll run through the day book, and then the three of us will kick things around. And then with peace, love, and understanding, we'd welcome your questions if you're here on the two-way platform. Some good hands already up, including, I believe, some new folks, which is spectacular. Thank you for that. If you're watching on this platform, raise your yellow electronic hand if you'd like to be part of the conversation. And if you're watching on X or on YouTube, don't put smack in the chat or raise your hand. Just watch and enjoy. And if you do want to comment, make it constructive. Be willing to engage with people who disagree with you, but don't engage in personal attacks, please. All right. The White House briefing is supposed to begin any minute at 9 a.m. briefing. Hogan, why are they briefing at 9 a.m. today?
They're briefing at 9 a.m. because they want to really set the table, pushing the One Big Beautiful Bill Act today, and remind those members of Congress who ran on and won on the Trump agenda that it's all right there in front of them. It's time to vote.
Yeah. So there's been waiting to see, is the president going to make more calls, have people up to the White House? And of course, where's MAGA? I talked to on Next Up with Charlie Kirk about this last week. Like when they wanted to save Pete Hegseth, you saw them mobilize fully. Charlie had a pretty good explanation as to why they haven't gone in all in yet, but expect, I believe, some MAGA mobilization this week at the grassroots level, at the Bannon, et cetera level, even though many people in the MAGA movement do not like the particulars of the bill, at least as it's emerging so far. The president today, 3 o'clock, he and the first lady are doing a bill signing in the Rose Garden. And then he's doing a law enforcement event at 4:30, closed press as of now. And then he's at the Kennedy Center, where the pool will cover him participating in a Kennedy Center board dinner. So that's a full day where he could talk a lot. JD Vance spent the weekend in Europe, had a bunch of meetings with foreign leaders, including Zelensky, including with the Pope. There was talk he was going to Israel. He is not. Scott Bessent tomorrow goes to Canada for the G7. Congress is in. Speaker Johnson's meeting with the Main Street Caucus tonight and many other meetings to try to move the bill forward in the wake of last night's big budget committee vote. Rules is expected to vote at 1 a.m. later in the week as they try to pass this before the Memorial Day recess. And the speaker is now saying there's a bit of a forcing mechanism here in the House vote because no Memorial Day recess until they vote on the bill. So we'll see what happens. Senate is voting at 5:30 on Charles Kushner's nomination to be the U.S. top envoy, the ambassador to France. And they're also having a procedural vote on their cryptocurrency legislation, which failed, went down in what we like to call partisan recriminations earlier, but now is maybe up for a revote. Okay, let's start with reconciliation. The conventional wisdom on this program is always, it's always darkest before the dawn, but the bill will still pass, or at least get to the Senate. I'm not sure what happens then. But Hogan, how would you lay out your expected timetable just on the House? Forget the Senate for now. Would you expect this to pass? Before Memorial Day or not?
I do.
Hogan, did you get all that?
Yeah. Listen, this is obviously one of those deals where it's a massive piece of legislation. It's called One Big Beautiful for a reason, because it is very big, and one of the descriptors, of course. But I think the speaker, the leader, Thune, and the Senate have been in lockstep here, obviously with the White House too. This bill checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. It's not going to be perfect. Not everyone is going to love everything inside the bill, but it's obviously a priority for the president of the United States. It's a priority for so many members as well. And I think as this week goes on, you're going to see some ups and downs, as is usual when you're coming to the head for a piece of legislation. But I think it ultimately gets over the finish line.
Dan.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, look, part of this is Congress hasn't done much so far this year. And so when they're thinking about what are you going to go into your primary on, what are you going to go into the general election, like this is the one big, beautiful bill. I mean, to Hogan's point, it's what Trump ran on, the stuff on the economy for energy and deregulation, and obviously all the tax components. So I don't see how this does not get done. I continue to think the Freedom Caucus is going to get rolled. It looks like they'll get to a number on SALT, which, as a New York resident, we're quite happy about. But I don't see how this doesn't happen. And I actually don't even know, Mark, if MAGA is going to really have to mobilize. Like, are they really going to dig in that much against Donald Trump? I mean, I would be stunned. Like they'll posture, they'll do a little bit, but at the end of the day, like nothing says principle like present in committee. I mean, they're going to back down.
But let me make one quick point. I don't think the Freedom Caucus is getting rolled despite their better efforts to characterize it as such. Let's be clear. The numbers in this bill, the budget numbers, the cuts, the spending, et cetera, were set weeks ago, months ago. They agreed to it. This cuts more than they asked for. It spends less than they asked it to spend. So it's met all of their requirements too. That's why it's a little confusing and concerning to so many who are like, wait a minute, you were in the meetings. We agreed to these things. We did better than you asked, and now you're still upset about it. That's what a lot of people, I think, in MAGA world are confused about, despite the posturing of so many on the far right here.
All right.
But wasn't part of that, Hogan, like that they were told, hey, let's get down this, do this process step. And then like we hear you and we'll address more of these concerns. So like I guess the question is, was it a final deal or was it like a deal to get through step one, step two? And they keep thinking at some point you're going to go higher on the cuts and make it tighter in terms of how much get out of the deficit.
Well, a couple things. First of all, does the Freedom Caucus get rolled a lot? Sometimes they're forced to swallow things they don't like, they didn't run on, their constituents don't like. It's part of Congress, and I get that. And myself, Mike Johnson, others who are on the right always want more spending cuts because we want our government to be balanced. We get that. This, however, is a situation where early on in these committees, there were 11 committees that came up with their individual sections, chapters of a book, if you will. And 8 of those chapters were written until the first of last week, where the last 3 had to be written, and they were written as well. So this entire thing has kind of been very transparent. And in those meetings, to answer your question, no, we came to it has to be here at least, or we're not going to vote for it. We beat or exceeded those expectations in pretty much every category.
Okay, let's talk about something else the president's doing today. He's supposed to call Putin and then Zelensky. The call's supposed to be at 10. No idea how long it will take or where we'll get the best readout. But this is how Bloomberg, this is 105A, this is how Bloomberg, which is very well sourced in Moscow and writes these stories without bylines. So it's a little mysterious where it's coming from, but this is their story. Putin heads into Trump call confident he has the upper hand. And let me read to you, 105B, please, a pretty long excerpt here because it's good reporting. Putin believes he's a strong hand ahead of a phone call Monday with Donald Trump as European leaders are trying to prevent the U.S. president from rushing through a deal. Putin is confident that his forces can break through Ukraine's defenses by the end of the year to take full control of the 4 regions he has claimed for Russia, according to a person familiar with Putin's thinking. That means the Russian president is unlikely to offer any meaningful concessions to Trump when the 2 leaders speak, and European officials are worried that Trump may try to force through a settlement regardless. So, Dan, I know your general view of this, but let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the call does not produce a breakthrough, and that Putin, continues to drive a bargain so hard it couldn't possibly be accepted by Zelensky or Trump. What happens then?
I think the question is it going to be acceptable to Trump? In that, I mean, I think part of this is like a psychological, psych ops move to say, like, I think I can break through. I'm winning. I'm going to achieve my goals. So I don't need to give much. And if you really want a deal, you need to look at the other end of the table and just kind of cut a deal for a deal's sake. The question really keeps coming down to, is Trump willing to kind of, ultimately give away Ukraine? Or is he going to draw a line in the sand and say, you're not getting more territory and we will put more arms in there? So it's been the $1 million question mark we've talked about for months. You and others have said, Rubio, Hegseth, the whole national security team does not want to see Ukraine disappear on their watch. We're going to find out.
Hogan.
Absolutely right. Obviously, a lot of options here too, but it seems as though when Russia invaded, and we can debate how that happened, of course, but I think when they were there, they took certain pieces of land. I don't see them giving that up. I think NATO is a bargaining chip that Trump is going to try and play as well. But there's no question that this started under the previous administration, now firmly in Donald Trump's lap. He knows he has good relationships with both leaders. He can have those conversations. I'm anxious to see what comes out of it. I don't know if that reporting from Bloomberg is correct. I'm sure Russia, is willing to have this conversation because they too, are concerned about what Donald Trump could possibly do to them as well in the way of sanctions or arming up Ukraine even more. So, as President Trump likes to say, we'll see what happens. But a lot of eyes on that meeting and that phone call today.
All right. We'll continue to follow both those stories, reconciliation and Russia, Ukraine, all week, and I'll have more on them on two-way tonight at 6 Eastern time. Now, the Biden story. Okay. We all wish the Bidens the best. We hope the president recovers and lives a long, healthy life. My job as a journalist, though, is to hold all powerful interests accountable to the public interest. President Biden is asking us to believe a narrative that, here's the White House briefing. Let's dip in, see what she's talking about.
This afternoon in the Rose Garden, President Trump, alongside First Lady Melania Trump, will sign the Take It Down Act into law. First Lady Melania Trump was instrumental in getting this important legislation passed. The Take It Down Act will protect victims of digital exploitation, hold internet platforms accountable by requiring them to remove such imagery from their platforms, and provide justice for victims by allowing prosecutors to go after those who publish non-consensual explicit images online. The First Lady met with members in the House and the Senate, survivors and their families, and advocates throughout the process.
All right,
to get
we'll come
this
back.
bill across
We'll monitor
the finish
that.
line. We are grateful for the First Lady's.
We'll monitor it and come back to it if they're talking about something we want to hear. Not that we're not interested in that, but we can cover that later. All right. As I was saying, the Bidens are asking us to believe the following two things are true: that despite getting the best medical care in the world, that his cancer was not diagnosed before last week, even though experts suggest that the chances of that are exceedingly low. And they're asking us to admit that the exact timing of his diagnosis falls roughly halfway between the release of the announcement of his diagnosis, between the release of the Her audio tapes and the release of the book tomorrow about the cover-up of his administration. And they're asking us to believe that from a family who has a documented history of not telling the truth about their personal lives when it comes to their public stakes. Could give many examples, but Biden Inc. and the president's acuity decline would be two prominent ones. So here's a clip from Morning Joe. Zeke Emanuel, a Democrat, a doctor, was asked repeatedly by the folks on Morning Joe, is it possible that the president would not have been diagnosed earlier? Here's what he said.
Yeah, you had said that very few people have it actually diagnosed at this late stage, that's rare. Doesn't it take some time for prostate cancer to develop to a point where it would spread to the bones?
Oh, he's had this for many years, maybe even a decade, growing there and spreading. That's right. And as you point out, Joe, it's been around for a very long time in President Biden years. Exactly how many we don't know, obviously. And it is a little surprising to many of us oncologists that he wasn't diagnosed earlier.
Understates the case. It's very surprising to every oncologist I've spoken to and communicated with. Pretty much the same point of view on Fox and Friends. Here's Dr. Siegel, 109.
Really surprising that it's this advanced at the time of diagnosis. Now, you can miss prostate cancer, but most of the time regular screening picks it up. A sitting president, I would expect to have advanced screening. Should not be subject to debate what kind of screening.
Okay, so what are the odds that they miss this cancer, which, based on its status, has been there for some time? Here's an article from NIH 107. Not an expert I had to brush up on these topics in the last 20 hours or so. But here's almost all patients with metastatic prostate cancer present with a high serum PSA level. However, progression of prostate cancer sometimes occurred despite a low serum PSA level. Those patients with metastatic prostate cancer and low serum level of PSA account for less than 1% of all patients. Okay, so maybe the president, somehow they missed it, but he's the president of the United States. He got excellent care. So last thing I'll say, and then want to hear from Hogan and Dan, is I said during the election, during the presidency rather, that if the Bidens weren't getting the president tested for Alzheimer's and other similar things, they were doing him a huge disservice. And if they were, they should have published the results of those tests. Don't know which they did. Well, we know they didn't publish the results of such tests, but I don't know if they didn't do them or they just did them and didn't publish them. As best I can tell, his PSA level was never released as part of the readouts of his exams. So I say once again, if he was tested and they didn't release the results, shame on them. If he wasn't tested, then they should sue the White House physician for malpractice. Hogan.
Agree with both of those things. And this is not lip service. I do want to say cancer is a horrible thing. I've had several relatives suffer from it, die from it, and I hate that anyone would get it, much less a former president. So my heart is with the family. My prayers are with them as well. But that's not what this conversation's about. It's about the politics of a cover-up. We already know they've lied about his health, both his physical and mental abilities in the last 4 years. It would not shock me at all. This is another way they moved to protect the president from the reality of his health and his problems, preventing the American people from seeing it. I will say I guess two choices are absolutely correct. You know, they should go after the physician if this was missed in a way that clearly shows most everyone else agrees should have been something caught through regular screenings, through regular health processes, et cetera. And I will say, having been in the Trump administration, every single time he did a physical, the scrutiny on every single piece of medication he took, the questions were relentless about his health. He's overweight, he's going to die, all these things. It was missed again with Joe Biden, and not on purpose. This is not by accident, it's by design. And I'm afraid this is just another in a long line of problems that we're going to learn about in the coming weeks and days, or weeks and months.
Dan.
Yeah, I think, Mark, as you said, like history is not going to be kind to how to Joe Biden's health, the last 2 years of his presidency. I agree with you. It is hard to imagine that this was missed given the amount of care that he was receiving. He got COVID at the end of his White House. So assume he was in the getting tested and they were checking him out for various things. They probably did some blood work around that. The only thing I can think of is if he did get it or they did catch it, it was likely quite recently, because the question, if they knew about it for, let's say, a year, is did he then get treatment, and how could you hide surgery and chemo? I mean, we didn't see him a lot, but like every few weeks or so, every week he was in public. And if he has advanced cancer, I would imagine they threw the kitchens or are throwing the kitchen sink at it. So if he was was he diagnosed potentially in, like, let's say December, and they were able to keep it quiet through January 20th? Possible. We didn't see him much between the election and like the first week of January. He was very kind of out of the public eye. So it's not a good look. I hope they didn't hide this as well. Every time I think the Democratic Party can't get lower, I seem to get surprised.
Yeah. So your scenario of, was he diagnosed? There's a video of him saying he had cancer, which the White House at the time said he misspoke. But your scenario where he had it and they secretly treated him, I can't rule it out.
Sure.
Can't rule it out. But at the same time, again, the experts and the data suggest that having advanced cancer like this is not something that just pops up. And again, some of the literature says someone his age wouldn't be tested regularly, although most of the literature says they would, and the president would be tested regularly under normal circumstances. And so let's leave that question aside for a minute. Let's deal with the second question. How could it be that this announcement occurs between the release of the Her audio and the book tomorrow? How could that possibly be, Hogan?
Well, I think all of this could have been solved if the press showed the slightest level of curiosity as related to this president or his administration. We'd know a lot of the questions you're kind of throwing out there had they cared to find out the answer. I don't know if they just didn't want to or didn't care. And either way, it's not good. But of course, in Washington, D.C., with the air thick with politics, I think it's pretty obvious in this tumultuous time and what's about to come out, the Her tapes, the book, as you just mentioned, doing something like this will obviously put the brakes on any reset that some journalists would try to do in going after and trying to find out more information. Now they're going to be scared of it. And I imagine stand down in a lot of instances when, in fact, this should only increase their level of questioning.
Well, so Dan, that's a good question. If this was done purposely to try to make him a more sympathetic figure and get less focus on the Her tapes and the book, it might have the opposite effect. Hogan says it should have the opposite effect. I think it might have the opposite effect. I think we saw for about 12 hours, even the New York Post paused scrutiny of Joe Biden and rounded up all the appropriate well wishes to him. But now the New York Post and others are looking at all the questions around this. And do you think that the press will or should pause scrutiny of Joe Biden because of this?
No, I don't think they should. Look, I will say this, like I'm as cynical as anyone, and I have been a huge critic of Joe Biden. If he was diagnosed with this after he left the White House, when they announce it is up to them. Good for them. Smart politics. Try to mat this down. If he had this as president, that is a different story. They did have an obligation to tell the country, just like they had an obligation to probably have him step down at some point in the last 2 years. But to me, yeah, okay, you're doing a smart political move. The guy didn't do many in 4 years, so like there's an irony that is, afterwards. But no, the press should ask a lot of questions. I mean, it is clear as day, Mark. We've talked about it for a while that he was not well those last 2 years. And there needs to be a lot more public dialogue about this, the press, the party, everything.
Yeah. 106, please. Former President Biden posted on social media this morning, thanks to those who'd wished him well and Jill well. There's the photo of them, a beautiful cat. I will say that there's a few experts. The Washington Post quotes the only expert I saw quoted in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, other major papers today, speaking to this issue of whether it was possible that the president could have been undiagnosed until just now, and that the diagnosis was at the stage it was at. The Washington Post quoted an expert saying, yes, in fact, that's totally plausible because the test isn't very good. Okay. No one I've talked to has said that. So now I think the question for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, after a first day of respectful coverage on a Sunday, is will they now speak to the experts I've spoken to who say chances that this was not something he knew he had when he was in the White House are de minimis. Let's see what happens. All right. If you'd like to get in on the conversation, please raise your hand. We're going to do 2 more topics and then get to you all. Program reminder, noon today, Citizen McCain, Meghan McCain will be here at noon, and 2-hour version of Two-Way Tonight. Okay. Tell you more about it at the end of the program, but we'll be on at 6 at the regular time, regular show. Mark Caputo will be here of Axios, who was one of the 2 reporters who broke the story of the Her tapes. So we'll talk more about the Biden health issue. I also hope to have a doctor. And who am I forgetting? There's one other person. Well, and then it's 7 o'clock. So second hour, same feed. Second hour, Steve Ballmer will be here. We'll talk about his organization and what they're doing to help educate the American people. So more on that at the end of the show. But again, noon, Meghan, and then a 2-hour Two-Way Tonight at 6. All right. The economy. Scott Bessent was on TV over the weekend saying that the tariffs would cost both American companies and American consumers some money. The president did some social media posts on the economy, and there's a bunch of, as always, a bunch of stats coming this week. So, Dan, where are we on both tariffs and the economy right now?
Well, Bassett also said that they're hoping to have some regional deals.
Yeah.
And Maria Bartiromo said that there is a deal to be announced this week, and she's fairly plugged into the Trump people. So that may be a tease of something that's coming. I think, as we've talked about now for a little while, companies have warned at some point they're going to have to start raising costs. It seems like as they're doing their earnings calls, they're saying that time is now. The economy is relatively strong. I mean, all things considered, it's holding steady. Employment, inflation has remained low. Employment is pretty good. Growth is, decent. So I think there's just this rush. Can Trump, get some of these deals done and pull these tariffs down before companies have to start really making moves? Because look, he's a visual guy. He knows that the images of empty shelves in Walmart or prices going up at back to school are not good. I mean, he gets it. So, browbeating Walmart's not going to work. They have a fiduciary to their shareholders, not to him. And we'll just see what happens.
Hogan.
I mean, I think Scott Bessent's one of the rock stars in this administration, with his ability to articulate the president's vision, outline the goals for the economy, for the American worker, for the American manufacturer. Trump has been pretty clear, talking about tariffs as far back as the 80s on Oprah Winfrey's show. He thinks this is a way to really reset the economy, and for too long, other countries have taken advantage of us. I think that's pretty clear to everyone. But this time period, as Trump said, would be a little bit difficult. Early on, he said, you may feel a little short-term pain, but this is going to reset the order to make it better for the average American. With the passage of reconciliation and more money in your pocket, those types of things, the growth that's expected to occur that occurred also in the first Trump administration, he really does believe that will offset any short-term pain from these tariffs. But Dan's correct in that these upcoming deals are now way more significant, I think, than even previously thought of, because as these numbers start to come in and people do feel the actual pain that was only talked about for months, then you have to have a reckoning. And how does that look and what shape does that take? It's going to be a minute before we figure it out. But Trump, absolutely. I've seen him in these meetings with these world leaders. I've seen him in these meetings with these CEOs. He is very dogged to ensure that whatever happens protects Americans. And so I'm quite confident that's what he's going to do here as well.
All right, real quick, guys, only if you have something interesting to say. Iran or Israel? You want to say anything about Iran or Israel? Have you got anything there?
JD Vance didn't go to see Netanyahu, and that tells you a little bit about where things are right now.
Yeah. Hogan, you want to say anything about Iran? Okay.
I think our relationship with Israel is better than it's ever been. I think it's fine. But there's no question the Abraham Accords in large part were met the first term because we rallied the region around the fear of a nuclear Iran. That's another big global issue that Trump is going to have to face down.
All right. One other thing, 103, please. I always like to do some alum news. Tim Hogan, who used to host this program, had his name attached to a, DNC fundraising email. Hi, Mark. It's Tim Hogan, the new War Room Director at the DNC. Blah, 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 asking for $3. Dan, how would you rate the language in this pitch? Effective?
It's great. I think that the average person would be happy to know that there is a war room and that they are doing research and that the party will be on a front foot. So I'm sure to the average person, this is a well-received email.
All right, Hogan, have you ever signed a fundraising solicitation for any?
Why didn't he just email you directly? Doesn't he know you well enough? I don't understand.
Good. He knows I don't have $3. Hogan, have you ever had your name affixed to an RNC or some other fundraising thing?
I don't think so, but I've been fixed to other fundraisers for organizations if I'm giving a speech at them.
Yeah, I'd love to see how you do with signing an RNC email. So maybe we'll suggest that to folks at the RNC. All right. Bring folks in again. As always, tell us after you unmute where you are, what's on your mind. And let's start with the good doctor. Dr. Len, welcome in. What kind of doctor are you, doctor?
Well, Mark, thank you very much. I'm a medical oncologist, and I will share with you, as I put in the chat, I've been involved in these issues for a lot of time. No longer. I'm used to be with the American Cancer Society, and I'll tell you, I used to help write the guidelines, including on prostate cancer. So it's not a new issue. And I was going to write a blog this morning, but I didn't wake up at 4 o'clock like I usually do. So it'll have to be later today. But all these issues are issues that are sort of anticipatory. There's medicine and differences, and there's also politics and how it applies to medicine and what we say about people, what we know when we say it, what it means, it has much greater impact. To the point that I put in the chat, it is understandable. I'm sorry to disagree with you because I have a great deal of respect for all of you, including all the audience.
Explain your point of view.
Real quick. Number one, if you read the comments, it said it was found by a nodule. That means he had a rectal exam. And a rectal exam finding a nodule is it's an uncommon way to diagnose prostate cancer, because when that happens, it raises your suspicion substantially that it's a later diagnosis, number one. Number two, according to guidelines, okay, let's be clear here, not the president, but guidelines. People in this age group, including folks like myself, have the option, in fact, even sometimes the recommendation, not to get the PSA test.
Right.
So that is a personal decision. Number three,
Doctor, let me stop you on those 2 points.
Sure.
Just because I don't want going to get too far.
That's okay. Yeah,
that's okay. So I take both points, and I believe both points to be true. But this is the president of the United States,
number three,
so to say he did not have a annual rectal exam it'd be malpractice if they didn't give him one. And number two, it'd be malpractice for him to turn down the test. The reason people that age turn down the test, they're not president. So I take both your points for a normal person, but I just want your perspective before you go to number three. Or maybe
that is number three.
Okay, so
that's number three. Number three is he's the president of the United States, and maybe, in fact, I put it in the chat. I think maybe for the president, you might have a different standard, but not going in for it. And plus, it could be a very aggressive cancer. And although most prostate cancers, and I fully agree with this, are slow growing and don't have to be diagnosed, some are rapidly growing and can be fatal. So trying to be short of a complex issue, but the bottom line is I can certainly understand how this may have happened. We may not agree with what they did, but that may have been what happened.
Okay, but doctor, let me just ask you, and I'll turn you over to Dan and Hogan for questions. If you're the president's physician and this happened, he's been in his position for many years. If you're the president's physician and only because he complained of some urination issues that you did this test, wouldn't you feel like you hadn't well treated your patients?
Well, number one, we can have that discussion. That was going to be in the blog. Okay, because I've had to comment and opine on people in the public space, and they make different decisions under different circumstances. Having said that, with Biden, we do find ourselves in a very unusual situation where the questions like this will come up.
But Len, let me put it in a different way. If this happened to me, my doctor regularly talks to me about cancer, and obviously the president's doctor would have had cancer on his mind. I mean, it wouldn't have been something he would say, well, Joe Biden's impervious to cancer. If my doctor diagnosed me with a cancer that had been inside of me, as Zeke Emanuel said, for maybe a decade, if he said, well, I never gave you a PSA test and I never gave you a rectal exam because I didn't, I'd sue him.
Except that I would.
I mean, that's.
No, hold on. Let the doctor answer first. I mean, it's malpractice. It's malpractice to not do those things for anybody if you're doing aggressive care, and certainly for the president, it's malpractice.
The president is in a different category.
No, I'm interrupting. I'm sorry to interrupt you again. He is in a different category, but I'm saying if that happened to me, if my doctor said,
I would defend that doctor.
Because
if the doctor said, this is the situation as we see it, and I can do this, but that we don't know that it's going to save your life or make a difference. If there was an informed, and that's a real short comment, if we had an informed discussion about the pros and the cons of both rectal and prostate exams,
the cons are virtually non-existent.
Not true. Not true. In fact,
what are the cons? What are the cons?
Rectal exam, we're getting into some territory here. In a rectal exam, we demonstrated a long time ago that it has a negative predictive value. That means it offers less in value. May seem from everyone's perspective that how can that be? But that's what we found and published that data a long time ago.
It's not a negative.
So,
it's not a negative.
That's what we found. So I would defend that doctor. The 82-year-old men, I'm almost in that age group, okay? 82-year-old men have the option of not having that exam, and there's no evidence that having the exam will improve their lives. Now, that means that some people are going to have other disease that we won't find, but that is the population recommendation. I'm not saying what the decision should be for the president of the United States. That's a different layer of question.
Dan.
If you were overseeing the care of the president of the United States and his son had cancer, he clearly, is the oldest president we've ever had, would you not recommend all these screenings for common cancers in people his age?
If his son had brain cancer, which he did, no. If he had other kinds of cancers, which are familially based, yes. If he had high anxiety because of his son's experience, yes. I mean, we all know President Biden has been very vocal about cancer research, and cancer care. To his credit, he's done a great job in that arena. But
Doctor,
normal people.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but I'm really
That's
trying to
okay.
focus this.
I know.
Forget the family history. If you're the president's doctor, and given his age and given the rate at which men get cancer, and particularly prostate cancer, what would be the argument against doing every possible test?
Every man in that age group, almost every man has prostate cancer. Every man.
Yeah.
Who's in their 80s has prostate. But finding it doesn't help save lives. For some it does. For some it does, but not for many.
But he's the leader of the free world. He's the
I understand that.
Yeah. America.
Hogan.
I agree.
Hogan.
I don't disagree.
Doesn't Biden, if the doctor's telling him we need to do these screenings, it's very important for the following reasons. He's like, nah, I'm fine. I'll get to it. I mean, is there any reporting out there, Mark, that Biden turned down these screenings or say he didn't want them?
We don't know
because he offered them and didn't have them. And side note, which is also odd.
We don't know
because Biden's doctor was my doctor.
Well, and by the way, can I just add, this is a side note, there was a story in Trump's first term that he didn't want the public to hear that he was getting a prostate exam because he thought it was kind of unmanly. I mean, that could have been fake news, but it was reported several places with some pretty high sources. So, I mean, but to your point, Hogan, it would raise the question, if a president turned down screenings that should happen, does the public have the right to know, including a president who is pretty old right now? I mean, to be fair.
Yeah.
What do we have in Trump? We had Trump. One final comment, if I may.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Remember that doctor with the little beard? He may have passed, so I don't want to be offensive to him or ad hominem.
Yeah.
But remember that guy with the beard? He would trot out and say he's the healthiest person I've ever seen in the world. That's what we had, and we asked for more, and we never got it. So it's a good question.
True, although Trump's the report on his latest physical was a lot more robust than anything we ever got from Joe Biden. All right, Doctor, thank you. Grateful to you for coming on. Look forward to your blog later. All right, Pam, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind.
Mark, thanks for having me. Love the show. Can you hear me?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good deal. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm pretty much a Republican voter, and I have been on before, but it was pre-election, so it's been a long time. So I'm not one of your threes to get you to keep the show going today, whether you said you need it or not. My point. And I feel terrible for Biden. He's gone through this cancer as a family and everything. And I think it's just horrible that he's got to deal with it. But as a country, the part that gets me is, and I'd like Dan and Hogan's thoughts on this. It seems to me that the Democrat Party has gone in a direction that the president it doesn't really matter if it's a person or AI, as long as they do the role of being president. It's all good. And if we hide all these facts about the guy, who cares? There's an administrative state that's in place and has been in place, and it's all going to work. And don't worry about it. He's the guy. And I know, Mark, you'll say, well, Obama was a great political athlete, and he was, and he is, but he also filled the role, and I voted for him the first time. He filled the role. But you remember when what's his name? They did the thing with the empty chair at the RNC, the second election.
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood, right? Yep. And it was like, I saw that. I'm like, exactly. I thought he was a great guy the first time. Second time, he's an empty suit. But to the Democrats, he fit the role. Is this being exposed now? This is what it feels like to me. And it's like, whereas Trump, and the Republicans had open primary twice where they had 16 people on stage, fighting it out, trying to figure out which ideas are going to work. So that's my question. Am I nuts to think that this is what's being exposed for the Democrats? Is this idea that it really doesn't matter who the guy is, as long as he's playing the role, there's all this support staff behind him. And I learned in business school, leadership matters. And I just feel like exposing it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dan.
Well, I think on your second part, I don't think Barack Obama was an empty suit. We can debate whether he's a good president or a strong president, but I think he was pretty present, pretty with it. I think it's not that the party the last 10 years has thought like anybody could do it. The deep state can, carry the football. I think it was anybody but Trump. It was just, they were so obsessed and fearful of Trump that like they threw every common sense, every, thing out the window. It had to be somebody that could stop Donald Trump. And in 2020, we had a contested primary. Kamala Harris ran, Bernie Sanders ran, Elizabeth Warren, like they all had moments. Joe Biden was actually kind of almost politically dead after New Hampshire and Iowa. But why did they rally around Biden? Because polls showed that Biden could beat Trump. He was the only one in those head-to-heads in the spring of 2020 that showed that they could win. So even though there were signs of his cognitive decline on that campaign, it was an open secret. Staff talked about he could not work at night. He couldn't work weekends. He got tired very easily. And that was at home on Zoom, right? There were already concerns, but it was he may win. He may stop Trump. So everything else went out the window.
Hogan.
And now we're paying a price.
Well, we are. Pam, you're right. And all the world is a stage. Nowhere is that more obvious and clear than in politics. Don't get me wrong. Understand, I think Trump is so unique in this space because he's not the typical politician, the cookie cutter, empty suit that we fill with all of our policy positions and they go up and parrot that. He's not a Mitt Romney, obviously. He's not someone who fits that mold. What I think he has exposed is putting someone up there who's real and raw against someone like Biden, who's basically always been in the middle of wherever the party is. If the party was more moderate, he was in that moderate lane. When they went more radical left, he tried to play that game too. And so you got that sense that as, I don't want to make it too oversimplistic, but the puppeteer thought process I think you're talking about is something a lot of people with his obvious physical and mental decline became more of a reality for a lot of folks. It just so happens in this time and space, it's the Democrats who put somebody up that's fairly weak in a lot of ways and is easily manipulatable by people around him. I do believe that. So the juxtaposition of where our party is right now versus where their party is right now couldn't be more different. They'll find their footing at some point. They'll put someone up. But to some degree, both parties and heads of parties play a role. The question is, how much of that is core values based versus just empty suit, empty vessel, fill it, and I'll go out there and parrot whatever you want me to parrot. And because of Joe Biden's history of doing pretty much just that, this is just another example, I think, of him being utilized by the powers that be and him just being that willing tool or willing accomplice.
Pam, thank you. Grateful to you. Kip, welcome in. I have to ask first if that's
Hello.
If that's
Yeah,
100%
is that
cotton,
sanctioned?
100% cotton and made in America.
It fits great. It's just great fit. And I'm a big fan of the show, if you can't tell.
Thank you very much. Is it 100% cotton and made in America?
I don't know where it was made. I ordered it online, but
Okay. All right. Well,
probably in China, but who knows?
Thank you for joining. Where do you live, sir?
I live in California, but I'm now sitting in Bucharest, Romania. And I just want to give a little observation I made here yesterday, and also a couple other observations and a suggestion for the show to make it even stronger.
Go ahead.
So last night was an election for the president here in Romania. And it was very close. It was, I think, 52 to 48, and the Democrat won. His last name was Dan. By that a coincidence, but what was interesting, it was very close. It was a MAGA type person that was running, and I was talking to a lot of people in the street, and it was very similar to the United States, where I was talking to like waiters and cooks, and they were very pro right wing guy, and the owner of the restaurant was very liberal, right? And it was the same kind of topics about NATO and immigration, and it was just kind of stunning. It was just like the United States. So it's spreading out throughout the whole world, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Okay. And thank you for that. What's your recommendation for the program?
Yeah, sure. So another quick observation. So you've been talking quite a bit about Biden's decline. And to me, there's nothing new about the news covering up for this. I mean, FDR had polio, and they really covered up for many years. JFK was a womanizer, right? And that was covered up. So to me, this is nothing new. And so I like what you're doing with targeting after the press, but to me, it's sort of like you're going after Burger King for selling burgers, which is unhealthy, as opposed to going after the customers that shouldn't be eating burgers, because the media, right, is selling a product, right, and they're selling it to customers that want to buy it, right? So at Burger King, they want to buy burgers. If you're on MSNBC, you're liberal and you want to hear a liberal message, right? If you're on Fox, you want to hear a conservative message, and you kind of want your little zone, and they're giving people what they want, right? So the media is just selling what people want, right?
Yeah,
the trick, I think. Well,
I'm sorry, I don't agree, and I don't like the metaphor, but I take your point. Do your last one, Kip, if you would.
Yeah, okay, just a quick suggestion. So I noticed that a lot of political shows are very, like this one, or unlike this one, are very biased, right? It's the conservative show or the liberal show. And the whole idea on those shows are pretty much, getting people charged up and kind of like hating the other side, kind of a pump, right? And you get a dopamine release when that happens. And unfortunately, I love this show. You don't have that because you have the two kind of sides, right? I hate that side, because you're trying to do the whole love and understanding thing. So as an idea to get that kind of dopamine release is maybe you can have like once a week, you can have something like a liberal person, a commentator saying something very charged and biased and maybe slanted, and then like a Republican doing the same thing, and have like a vote and kind of demonize people that are doing what you don't want to do, which is being polarized.
Yep. All right, Kip, appreciate that. All I'll say is our dopamine hits come from the pocket squares. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
Does it not come across how much I hate Dan?
Yeah. I mean, look, you folded it, which is the ultimate FU, as opposed to poofing it. So yes,
I get the tension. I feel it palpably. Here's Michelle, a two-way regular and a nurse. Michelle, welcome and thank you for joining. Would love to hear your perspective on the Biden thing.
Yeah. So I just want to. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Just a couple of disclosures. So I am a Trump voter, Trump supporter. I think that Joe Biden is, I don't think he would. I think he was a relatively corrupt politician. I think that the Biden family was kind of corrupt. I think the administration was kind of corrupt. All of that aside, Joe Biden was a father. He's a man. And it's very sad to hear about this diagnosis. It's extremely sad to think about the latter part of his presidency, and really before that, as you guys were just talking about. I feel like he was a puppet and he was used, and I'm disgusted, and I think the media should be disgusted, and I think that the family and a large part of the media was complicit in all of this. And I just think that he was used, and it's horrifying. I think, I and I know a lot of us have shared experiences, but I think about like my grandfather and so the last, couple of years of his life, when we were around him and he would stand up, we would be around him to make sure he wouldn't fall. He would repeat his stories. We enjoyed that. We entertained them, but we heard them over and over. And it is so distressing to think about this is what they did to Joe Biden, to his family. I cannot believe that they they allowed this, and it's very upsetting.
Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Michelle, thank you for that. Hogan.
Yeah, Michelle, I appreciate the comments. Thank you for watching and being engaged, and thank you for voting for President Trump. I appreciate that too. Yeah, I mean the whole situation I think is horrific for so many different reasons we've discussed here. I do think if this moment in time isn't utilized by the media to have a little bit of self-reflection here and a little bit of self-awareness and say, this is something we should have caught. These are questions we should have asked, and try and rebuild some of the trust they've lost through COVID, through the Biden years, through so many other things, then it's going to be a wasted opportunity. I do feel as though, I have my own opinions about the media and their bias and their cover-ups for different people and different politicians. But this one, to me, is one of the worst in American history. The more we know here, the better off we'll be, and the media will begin to repair such a damaged and tarnished reputation should they actually get involved and engaged in a way they haven't to this point.
Dan.
I could not agree more, and I'm upset that I'm just upset that I don't want the Democrats to say, oh, we've got this upsetting, very sad new diagnosis. Let's brush this all aside. There are so many different problems about this. One of them is the human level that I just want to talk about, that, he's a man, he has a family, he deserves to have the, whatever remaining amount of time to live with dignity. And that has been lost because I think of political power. I think there were people who just, shoved him into this position, and it's a tragedy. And I just want to kind of point that out. And I hope that everybody where was everybody who knew about his cognitive decline, maybe knew about this cancer diagnosis, plus or minus? Again, we're not sure. And I respect the doctor's opinion. I know that there's a lot of nuance to medical decision making for individual patients. But it's horrifying, and I'm disgusted. And I think the media, do they think that we're stupid? Like, do they think that we didn't know? We all knew.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, and that's the irony, is that even Democrats knew, because 70 to 80% of them kept telling pollsters in 2022 and 2023 he was too old. It was the party leadership that kept saying, no, we're going with him. Like, we can't have a primary. If he steps down, we're going to get Kamala Harris, right? They had no faith in her. Biden had no faith in her. Schumer, Jeffries, Pelosi. So you're right. Like, we did all of these things thinking it would stop Trump. Instead, it strengthened Trump, right? Because he completely looked like the sane, rational, went through a competitive primary, et cetera. And now, as we look to go forward, like Mark and I get emailed, Hogan, you may get them too. Why don't you focus more on Donald Trump? Although I doubt Hogan gets those. There's such little credibility within the party and the media to now pivot and say, well, now we have to ask all these questions about Trump's health and about what Trump's family is doing and Don Jr. and like everything, when there was such a blind eye with all of what was going on with Biden. So look, we paid a price. We lost.
Yeah. And I'd say one last point. I'm sorry. Jake Tapper, I hope that his career should go up in flames after this. He was such an absolute hypocrite. I know that a lot of people in the media know Jake, like Jake. I don't know Jake. I don't need to like him. I would give him credit if he was honest, but I just saw a clip of him ripping Laura Trump apart. I don't have any care about Laura Trump. I know her role in the last administration. I don't have any strong feelings on her, but she was making relevant points about Joe Biden, and he ripped her to shreds. And he knew it. I mean, we all have eyes. We all have had an aging grandparent or parent. We all knew. And yet Jake just said, nope, nothing to see here. He has a stutter. I'm sorry, that's BS. And for Jake Tapper to actually come out and say, oh, look at all of the discovery I had. It's a joke. It is an absolute joke. And his career should go up in flames because he has lost all credibility.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Hogan, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, just real quick, Michelle. One of the things that is most offensive to voters, and we saw this in the last election, is when they're experiencing something in their real life and the media tries to tell you it's not happening. When they say the border's open, I got these people flooding into my community, and they're like, no, it's closed, I promise. Hey, the economy is really hurting my family. No, it's transitory. Actually, inflation is good for you. What are you talking about? The economy's great. That's really offensive to voters. And this health thing is a great example of that. I can see the man not being able to finish a sentence. I can see him not be able to walk, being led around by his wife or other foreign leaders. And the media was telling us, no, he's fine. This just is another issue that has been exposed in the last 4 years that I think needs to be addressed, not just by the Democrat Party, and far be it for me to give advice to Dan and the Democrats, but also by the media. They have been doing this now for decades in this country. They've gotten busted time and time again. And there is a reason their popularity is somewhere between Congress and COVID, because they have done this to themselves.
Yeah. Len, I would just want to ask you, I brought you back. I appreciate you still being here to ask you a question. Somebody texted me, and I also saw the same thing on Twitter. Is it the case that the cancer that President Biden says he has is, quote, hormone sensitive, so it would have spiked a PSA test years ago?
No, the test doesn't measure hormones. It measures the antigen, the prostate-specific antigen. The hormones are used to treat it because we know that by substantially reducing testosterone, just as we do for women with older women with breast cancer, reducing estrogens, that the cancer will go into remission. And frankly, I think that there's been a lot of reasonable commentary in the press, unlike past events. We do have more treatments. Now, I will not opine on how this is going to go. That's not something I want to say. But hormones, you don't measure the hormone, you measure the antigen.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Let's run through a few things, folks. Noon today on Citizen McCain, Megan will be here with her two guests, AJ Edelman, who's an Israeli Olympic athlete and a great political analyst. He's been on my program as well. Fantastically interesting guy. And then Rachel Beta, Politico. So that's noon on Citizen McCain. Don't miss it. All right. Tonight on Two-Way Tonight, a special 2-hour edition, regular time, 6 p.m. Mark Caputo of Axios will be here to talk about all the Biden stuff and the Trump administration. And then at 7, Steve Ballmer, same two-way. You just stay on it from 6 to 8. Steve Ballmer will be here. Do we have the video, guys?
We do.
Steve Ballmer is the founder of USA Facts, which takes government data and makes it accessible to all of us. It's an incredible public service. And here's a little bit of Steve from a new video coming out soon explaining tax rates.
It's important to note that tax policy changes a lot, and it certainly drives a lot of what gets discussed in Washington, D.C. Here's how individual tax brackets have changed over the last 3 decades. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 reduced the number of brackets from 14, that's a lot of brackets, to just 2, with rates of 15% and 28%. Through the years, there have been 6 other big changes. The most recent, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, called the TCJA, but also called the Trump tax cuts. It lowered most rates from 2012, leaving us with 7 rates as of the date of this recording, which is March 17th of 2025.
Gives you an idea of what USA Facts does. I know that some people in the chat talked about the graphics. I worked in network news. Those are great graphics, and that's part of the challenge, right, to bring this stuff alive. So Steve's making his debut on Two-Way this evening, so we hope you'll join us again 6 o'clock for the regular Two-Way Tonight, and then Steve Ballmer and I talking about USA Facts and how we can all be better informed as consumers and citizens and voters. Hogan, very grateful to you for joining today.
Well done.
Any final words you want to issue before we cease?
One big, beautiful bill.
Big, beautiful bill. All right. Dan, what do you got going on tonight?
I'm on with Leland Vittert tonight at 9 to discuss Joe Biden. And are you going to get Ballmer to pick the NBA Finals?
I may well. Of course, Ballmer, in addition to being the former CEO of Microsoft, also owns the Clippers. I will be on with Chris Cuomo tonight at 9 o'clock. So,
wait, I'm on FBN. I'm on Fox Business tonight with Liz McDonald.
what time? What time's that, Hogan?
5-ish.
All right. So all three of us will appear on cable news later today. Thank you all for watching. Particularly grateful to Dr. Len for sharing his expertise. And again, it's an important story about accountability. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you at 6 o'clock again, a special 2-hour edition. Don't forget Megan at noon. Have a good day. Thank you, Hogan.
Thanks, guys.